Disney CEO Bob Iger and his top executives are furious over a major blunder they didn't see coming. Their first mistake? Trying to reshape Snow White to fit their woke DEI agenda. But the bigger misstep was casting Rachel Zegler as the lead. Now, they're realizing this could be a disaster for Disney, but with the movie's release just months away, it's too late to undo the damage.
Admit it, Disney. It's time to scrap Snow White and fire Rachel Zegler.
No! Let's be real. The marketing for this film has been anything but subtle. Rachel Zegler, leading the charge to rewrite everything, promised that this Snow White wouldn't be just another princess. No more waiting for Prince Charming. This time, she's a self-saving girl boss. Clearly woke, right? But here's where things get tricky for Disney. In their attempt to modernize the classic, they've stripped away almost everything that made Snow White, well, Snow White. Think back to the original animated film, Snow White, a 13-year-old with a voice like a bird and a sweetness that perfectly contrasted the rugged dwarves. That balance of her gentle nature and their rough edges created the magic. And then there was the prince, a love-struck young man whose kiss saved Snow White. But this version? Not so much. Zegler even hinted that the prince might be cut entirely, calling him a stalker and suggesting the story no longer needs him.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
The trailer for this Snow White reboot, which dropped before Wicked, is already causing a divide among audiences. You can feel the shift in direction with all the heavy CGI. But is it truly live action when every scene is crafted on a computer screen? The dwarves, once known for their rustic charm and rough humor, are now CGI characters, stripped of the human spark they once had. Originally designed as a group of distinct personalities, this CGI version just doesn't hit the same. Stripping away the essence leaves something hollow, an artificial layer that fails to connect with fans. And let's talk about the CGI challenge behind the scenes. How can you act when your co-stars are just tennis balls and green screens? In The Little Mermaid, we saw Halle Bailey interact with animatronic sea creatures or pretend to talk to fish, but it's hard to bring real depth when you're acting into a void. This could mean Zegler's Snow White, while technically live action, ends up looking like she's performing in a vacuum, delivering lines with little chemistry and a lot of flatness.
Rachel Zegler doesn't really do the big things like love, kindness, or regret. But when it comes to hate, oh boy, hate, that's her jam, and she just spread it all over Instagram for the world to see.
Of course, the elephant in the room is Zegler's own attitude and comments. If Disney thought they could win over traditional audiences with an updated, empowering Snow White, they clearly underestimated her outspoken political stances. Zegler's social media outbursts, targeting Trump supporters and even telling them they should never know peace, didn't exactly make her the ideal ambassador for the beloved Disney spirit. And when she apologized, it felt less like genuine remorse and more like a damage control move.
Snow White. And I gotta tell you, the movie is already dead on arrival. That's because Hollywood's new evil queen, Rachel Zegler, just cursed 76 million Americans with her heartfelt message. She said, "May you never know peace." And all because you voted for Trump.
Zegler has a talent for derailing success, especially when it comes to billion-dollar companies. Ever since she trashed the Snow White remake, producers have been steering clear of her. In fact, she hasn't been part of any major projects in the last 2 years, and her reputation is making filmmakers think twice. Hiring her now feels like a warning label. This project might flop. Right now, her career seems completely stalled, all thanks to her own actions. If Disney's goal was to modernize the story, it looks like they've gone too far, risking the loss of the traditional balance that made the original so beloved, the fairy tale charm paired with a moral lesson that audiences adored. Now, this new Snow White represents modern, empowered feminism, which some love, but many find hard to swallow. No matter how much the studio spins this as a progressive step, fans who cherish the original subtleties might feel left behind. So, where does this leave us? In a place where Disney is betting big on a modernized Snow White that speaks to today's audiences, but alienates those who fondly remember the classic. With the trailer offering only glimpses of the storyline and no promise of a coherent narrative, it's hard not to feel cautious. Add Zegler's political rants into the mix, and Disney's task of winning back those skeptical hearts becomes even trickier. People are fed up with the endless live-action remakes that inject modern-day agendas into stories that were never meant to be political manifestos. And it's not just Snow White. This has become a recurring trend in Disney's strategy. They take a beloved, established story, and instead of keeping the essence of what made it iconic, they layer it with the latest ideology. But what they forget is that these woke narratives, meant to feel progressive and empowering, often come across more like a box-ticking exercise than a story with depth. The result? A cinematic mishmash that's neither original nor emotionally impactful. Looking at the original Snow White, it wasn't just a fairy tale, it was a profound coming-of-age story. As storytelling expert Jonathan Pooch once said, Snow White represents a young woman's journey to navigate the world. The dwarves, with their rough masculinity, symbolize men who ultimately don't measure up as a quality partner. And then there's the prince, not just a love interest, but the benchmark for what a worthy partner looks like. He embodies hope and change, showing that true love is earned, not just admired. What this remake misses is that it's not the idea of a prince rescuing a princess that's problematic, it's the type of man being portrayed. The original Snow White teaches a deeper lesson. Don't settle for someone beneath you, or someone who's not truly your match. When it comes to gender roles, the story champions the idea that women deserve the best and should never accept anything less. Today's feminist takes on the tale, where Snow White becomes a fierce, independent warrior, often overlook that nuanced storytelling.
Going to completely flop. And I think you're right, they're abandoning the classic, story framework for this girl bossified version. People are tired of that. People are tired of live action remakes generally. It's tough because every time they do make a new movie that's original, it's kind of following the same woke narratives that are actually unoriginal because they're pre-scripted to follow this woke ideology.
Then there's the irony of the girl boss Snow White in the new film. While the original princess had a subtle strength, gentle yet courageous, shining through her trials, the new version feels like it's trying way too hard. Snow White wasn't meant to be the tough, take no prisoners type. Her strength was in her compassion, her innocence, and her ability to inspire those around her. This shift from genuine empowerment to an exaggerated feminist archetype feels, frankly, forced. But it's not just the story that's suffering, it's the filmmaking too. Walt Disney's original Snow White wasn't just groundbreaking for its story, it was a monumental achievement in animation. Created on a budget of $1.5 million, a fortune at the time, it was a labor of love that nearly bankrupted Disney, but turned into a masterpiece. Today, with budgets in the hundreds of millions and a heavy reliance on CGI, we're left with a film that looks shiny but feels lifeless. Take the length of the movie. Walt Snow White was a tight hour and 23 minutes, perfectly paced with every scene making an impact. The live-action adaptation, on the other hand, is pushing over 2 hours, dragging on with filler that does nothing but push an agenda. And the irony? All that excess comes with a lack of substance. They've got the big budget and state-of-the-art effects, but what's missing is that human touch, the creativity and spark that made the original unforgettable. Now, contrast that classic with what we're seeing in the remake. The magic has been replaced by a rushed CGI spectacle, and the complexity of the characters has been reduced to what fits into a politically correct agenda. Snow White is no longer just an innocent young girl trying to make life beautiful. She's been remade to fit a woke image that values ideology over storytelling. As for the dwarves, they've been stripped of their uniqueness and replaced with CGI versions, little more than eye candy, devoid of the humor and warmth that made them iconic.
It's tough because every time they do make a new movie that's original, it's kind of following the same woke narratives that are actually unoriginal because they're pre-scripted to follow this woke ideology. And then anything that they make as a remake, they inject that same ideology into.
Disney's gamble on this new Snow White is one that will likely backfire. The story isn't just being updated, it's being reimagined in a way that sacrifices what made it great. Sure, it might look impressive with its massive budget, CGI, and modern themes, but the real question is, does it have the heart of the original? Based on the initial reactions and what we've seen so far, that answer seems to be a resounding no. What do you think about this? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos on woke Hollywood projects like Snow White. See you in the next one.